Hello and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Laura Gomans, and today we come to you with a special dispatch from Cannes Film Festival. Every May, a stretch of Mediterranean beachfront becomes home to 10 super important days in cinema. Your social media feed floods with standing ovations and a measuring contest of who gets the longest. Reputations are made and broken, new talent is discovered, and a plate of risotto is $45. Cannes 2026 has just played out, and to chat about what actually mattered this year, we brought in someone who's been present at the Croisette since 1999. Legendary film critic Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian joins Hugo Emmerzael to walk through the highs and lows of this year's Cannes Film Festival. Before we start, you can support us by leaving a review. It really helps other cinema lovers find us. And don't forget to send us a voice memo with your most controversial film hot take or confession. We'll play one at the end of each episode. Also, there's a lot of fun stuff happening here at Lab 111 in Amsterdam, including a screening of the Japanese classic Moving with a steamy bowl of ramen on May 31st, and a lecture on the filmic alchemy of Jean-Luc Godard on June 4th.
I am joined today by prolific, renowned film critic Peter Bradshaw, who is here in Cannes on behalf of The Guardian. Peter, welcome to Celebrating Cinema.
Thank you for inviting me to come on. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. We ask all of our guests as a first question always the same one, which is a first formative memory of seeing or going to the movies and how that maybe also shaped the cinephiliac life to come. Can you tell us a bit about what a young Peter Bradshaw experience was with the movies?
Okay, that's an interesting question because different movies and different types of movie had a different formative effect on me at different stages of my childhood. I often say that talking about one's first experience with cinema is a way of talking about Walt Disney. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but talking about it tends to be talking about the classic 60s movies of Walt Disney, especially for people of my age and generation. And at that level of being, a really, really little kid of 4, 5, 6 years old, I went to see the classic Disney movies like The Jungle Book or whatever it was. And like everybody else, I was absolutely mesmerized and terrified by this quite extraordinary film. And I particularly remember when I was a child being hypnotized by the terrifying boa constrictor Car with his colossal sort of throbbing eyes.
Oh my God,
out of the
yes.
screen. It was absolutely terrifying. But later on, I think my formative experiences as a late teen, maybe a young adult, I would say it's kind of a complicated thing. My parents loved a movie and they inculcated that love of it in me, and that is the old Ealing comedy Kind Hearts and Coronets, which is a classic 1949 black and white movie directed by Robert Hamer, starring Alec Guinness as all 9 members of one particular family, one particular sinister and aristocratic English family. And Dennis Price, the now sadly slightly forgotten British actor Dennis Price, who plays the young draper's assistant, a shop assistant in London, who is the heir to a dukedom. He is very, very far down the list of somebody who could, in theory, inherit the dukedom. And he and his mother have been treated very badly by this arrogant, aristocratic, blue-blooded British noble family, all played by Alec Guinness. And he sets out to murder them all.
Oh my God,
to
that sounds
become
insane.
the Duke. And I often say that it is the greatest serial killer film in history.
Wow,
because
that's high praise.
He executes all of them with absolute icy cold precision and callousness, and yet you find yourself admiring him and rather loving him at the same time. And Mum and Dad loved this movie. I loved it too. I watched it over and over again on TV, and when I came up to University to Cambridge, they seemed to be always playing it at university film clubs, of which there were a lot in those days, who would run 16mm prints, which they would hire in various rooms. And I was always watching it. I always thought it was great. But I think it was only much later, in later life, when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, that I realized the terrible message of this film, which it is, in fact, it is a parable for male careerism. It's a parable for all of us. All of us, if you want to rise through the ranks in your chosen job, you sort of have to kill everyone on your way to the top, in a way, to kind of do everybody down. Now, obviously, this is the most extreme, even in a metaphorical sense, it is an extreme version. But when that parable of it dawned on me, and it kind of didn't dawn on me as a kid or a teen or even in my 20s, but it kind of dawns on you in later life what this film is really about. it achieves a kind of late life, late spurt of meaning, a terrible message to people, particularly men, because part of the poignancy and absurdity of this film is the Louis, who is the would-be Duke, feels that he has to become the Duke in order to impress a young woman who's rejected him.
I see.
And that is an almost universal experience for men, is that they feel in their hearts that in order to become attractive to women, they have to rise through the ranks professionally in terms of prestige.
Well, Peter, this is a very convenient film then to ask a question, and I hope that you did not murder a lot of your fellow critics, but
No.
I'm very curious how you yourself embarked on this journey of becoming a film critic, and also to rise to the ranks of, admittedly, we can say there's not that many critics that are being read all over the world, whose names kind of and reputations precede them, who have in that sense, let's say, an iconic standing in the world of contemporary cinema, and yet I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with one of them, I believe.
That's very kind of you to say.
Seem to be one of the hardest working men here in Cannes, writing so many incredible reviews for The Guardian. So could you briefly take us back to your emergence in the world of film criticism?
Okay, sure.
And please tell me you didn't murder 9 other critics.
No, I certainly didn't. But what it was is that when I was offered the job, I thought it was incredible because they were offering me a job that I would want to do anyway for nothing. I would do it for nothing, and the fact that they were going to pay me to do it was kind of mind-blowing to me. I had a very, what to me is weird, but perhaps looking back on it, maybe slightly generic for many people. I never studied film at university. When I was at university in the 1980s, and we're talking a long time ago now, there really wasn't any such thing as a film studies course. You could get almost hit over the knuckles with a ruler for suggesting that you wanted to study anything as ridiculous as film.
It's like entertainment.
It's like entertainment. It's like saying you wanted to study fairground rides or something like that. It just had no intellectual status. The nearest thing was studying English literature, which I did for fully 7 years. I did 3 years of a first degree, and then I did a PhD in, heaven help me, 17th century English literature.
Oh my God.
And which, as many people remarked to me at the time, rendered me even more unemployable than ever.
And somehow you came out unscathed.
Somehow, yeah.
With your sanity intact.
Well, kind of. I brooded about being an academic, being a professional academic, certainly, but nobody gave me a job. It wasn't clear to me that I was ever going to get a job. I certainly didn't believe in myself. I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and said, do I see a professional academic looking back at me? And I guess I didn't see it.
Wow.
So I thought, well, I'm going to be a writer. I think I can be a journalist. I'm going to apply for a job in journalism. And I still didn't think I am going to be a film critic. I wanted to be a journalist. I was interested in the movies. I love the movies, of course. But even at that time, I thought that is kind of a recherche job. And it's like winning the lottery to get that job. So I started with a newspaper in London, which is now almost defunct, called the Evening Standard. You've probably never heard of it, and sadly now it's almost dead. But it was relevant to what I do now because it was a real education in old-fashioned, rough journalism and great, horrible, big beasts of what we used to call Fleet Street telling you to get on with it and telling you to write something right away. Do it now. I don't want to hear any precious maundering about, oh, I need time to think about it in a darkened room. I remember once I sat down with a pad and a biro. I literally started writing what I was going to write on a pad, thinking I would type it up later as if I was typing up my PhD thesis or something. And my editor literally grabbing the pen out of my hand, throwing it across the room said, you're going to type that directly onto the keyboard right now. Nowadays, of course, he would be arrested for doing something like that. But anyway, it was actually quite good advice because I got used to writing against the clock.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this in a minute. I got used to it in a way that people who maybe started as film critics did not get used to it.
You know how to be on the beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how to be on the beat, and you know how to write quickly.
Yeah.
And you know how to write very cogently and simply, and also succinctly, and also with the ethos of making it clear what it is you mean in the first couple of sentences.
Yes.
So people can get a sense of where it is you're coming from, what it is you think right away in the first paragraph. Bang. You're not withholding anything from the reader. hopefully you want the reader to come with you. You've said enough, you've done enough performing to make them stay with you until the end of the piece. But you're not teasing them. No. You're not thinking, wow, this mystery is going to be revealed like the ending of an Agatha Christie novel. It's quite clear what I mean. Anyway, I did that. Weirdly, for the Evening Standard, which was a real education in old-fashioned journalism, I did almost everything except the movies. It was really strange. I wrote about politics, I wrote about books, I wrote about TV, I kind of wrote about everything. And then I had a weird moment of like a 15-minute burst of fame because I wrote a satirical mock diary satirizing a British politician, a guy who's now called Alan Clark, who was a very reactionary right-wing politician in those days in the late 90s. And he got absolutely furious and sued the newspaper, which brought me a whole lot of publicity.
You were like, thank you, Alan.
Like, yeah. He kind of invested in my career because I became this sort of hero of free speech, which is fantastic. And it was at that stage that an executive on The Guardian, a guy called Ian Katz, who since has left newspapers and is now head of Channel 4 TV, was very amused by it. And he said to Alan Rusbridger, who's the editor, he just said, hey, this guy is funny, he's sort of straight. Why don't we... And we have a gap because our film critic, a wonderful, wonderful guy called Derek Malcolm, had just retired. What do you think? Should we offer this guy the job? And Alan said yes. So, I mean, I'll never forget it until I die. I mean, I was literally sitting in my office in the Evening Standard, and he rang up and he said, I'm Alan Rusbridger, would you like to come and be our film critic?
And what year are we talking about now, Peter?
1999.
Wow.
It is the very end of the 20th century. Incredible to think. I think, what was he expecting? Was he expecting me to play it cool? Was he expecting me to say, well, I have to talk to my agent, I have to talk to my manager, blah, blah, blah. And I virtually shouted yes down the phone at him. And there it was. It was as simple as that. I started more or less the next month. I started, at the deep end. There was no instruction. There was no formal thing. I was sort of trusted to bring a kind of common sense and learning on the job and being a quick learner, which I was and am. And at first, there's no doubt about it, and this is a long time ago now, we're talking about 27 years ago.
Yes.
Some people didn't like the cut of my jib. Some people thought, who is this guy? Because I was not known as a film journalist by any means. Nobody knew anything about me. If they knew anything about me at all, it was the author of this silly and ridiculous, satirical nonsense. And they thought, is this guy taking the mickey? Is this guy pastiching film criticism in the same facetious way?
See.
And I had to persuade them that I wasn't. I had to persuade them that I wasn't just pretending to do it. I really was doing it. And, there were some knocks in those days because the Web 2.0 commenting was just coming in. People were realizing that they were allowed to attack journalism. Critics...
To feed back.
Yeah,
to
people were allowed to
yes.
feed back. Critics were eligible to be criticized. And some people really stuck the boot into me, which was a rough experience. But I get it because I believe then and believe now in freedom of speech. And so, there it is. But I felt that I just had to carry on and hopefully win people round, mainly through persistence, to kind of just show that I'm not just an amateur. I'm not just a dilettante. Exactly. I'm somebody who really cares about it and really wants to do it and cares about the movies, cares about the movies that I write, and cares about the people who read about what I write about.
Speaking of persistence, Peter, we are now here at the rooftop of the Palais de Cinema, the main festival hub of the Cannes Film Festival. I'm very curious before we dive into this year's edition, and I'm very curious to pick your brain and discuss some of the key films that have played here. When was the first time in this new position that you touched down in the Croisette and stormed the Côte d'Azur as an emerging film critic for The Guardian?
It was almost immediately on starting the job.
Really?
It was May 1999. Yeah, it was...
a legendary year, by the way, for cinema as well, to start the job.
Year. Yeah, sure. We had The Sixth Sense, we had Fight Club, we had American Beauty, we had lots of very big kind of indie Hollywood kind of iconic classics. I'm trying to remember what was in the Cannes competition. The winner was Rosetta, I think, by the Dardenne brothers.
And which is also a touchstone film and shaped art house cinema to come, of course. Yeah,
which was a wonderful movie. Terribly sadly, Emily Duquesne died, I think, last year. Which was a wonderful movie, which I remember very well. In those days, Cannes was comparable to what it is now. I think if I took anybody here at this festival and took them back in a time machine and get them to show them the 1999 Cannes Festival, they would recognize what was going on. It hasn't changed that much, to be quite honest with you. There's still the competition list, the Uncertain Regard, Directors Fortnight, the Quinzaine des Réalisateurs, as it was called in those days.
And now we have the
Cinéastes. International Critics Week still existed. There weren't as many sidebars, and there weren't as many of these wonderful classic restorations, which Cannes has come up with. Those amazing restorations, which have been such a huge thing in modern Cannes. The weird thing, I remember, strange thing, is that there were earphones as opposed to subtitles for many films. You literally had earphones, and it was somebody's job to translate. I watched a Russian film where somebody was translating.
So you had the distinct kind of like French pleasure of watching a lot of dubbed movies.
Yeah, it was kind of almost dubbed. I mean, you heard it, and these people who had to translate it live had the awful job of, doing sex scenes and going, and it was very bizarre. So that was the main thing.
We have to go back, take us back to this.
That was very, very different. I mean, and those days, one of the big changes, of course, in any public life and any film festival was COVID, when automatic online ticketing was brought in to enforce social distancing in the auditorium. Yeah. And then it stayed in. I still wonder if that was a good idea, because it was much simpler in a way. There was more queuing, but there's much less online bureaucracy.
Yeah.
When you just had your badge and you just
show up. That's how I started my Cannes adventure 10 years ago in 2016. In that sense, some, let's say, nuts and bolts of the festival have changed. Yeah. But it's somewhat remarkable to hear how much stayed the same, which is also a feeling that at this point I have now. That there's, let's say, a timeless grandeur, of course, that's being bestowed on these films. Also, I would say a sense of like almost French traditionalism that is being celebrated. Well, so you have then already have had 27 years of Cannes.
This is my 28th year, I think.
Incredible,
my 28th
behind
Cannes.
the
Incredible
birth.
to think about. I mean, I almost don't want to think about it. But yeah, I mean, and I think what has really changed is what is expected of me and what's expected of critics, is that basically we have to do a lot more. I mean, when I first came to Cannes, really, and I can hardly bear to say it out loud, I really wasn't required to do very much. I mean, I wrote a few roundups, sort of impressionistic roundups, and only sort of 3 or 4 individual reviews. That was all that was required.
And now I would say that you are publishing on a daily basis, or even sometimes having 2 reviews out on the same day, which is, to be honest, now on the same beat that I am also at. Yeah. Which also offers an interesting proposition, right? Which is how to find the combination between how much you can watch and how much you have to write to get the most out of this limited time that we are spending here on the Croisette.
Yeah, that is the real issue. I love the fact that I can write. I don't worry about it. I don't agonize about it. I love the fact that I can publish what I think at some length. I don't mind that at all. But the problem is, you sometimes don't have the time to experiment. You don't have the time. You just think, well, here's this really interesting looking movie in Uncertain Regard or Critics Week. I just don't have time to see it, especially when you have to get up at 10 to 7 every morning and log on to book the tickets.
Your bureaucratically inclined tickets.
Exactly, and it's very, very tricky. And I think, well, I don't know, I've got to see these films in competition. I've kind of committed to see these movies in competition, and some of them are going to be a bit stately, and some of them, frankly, are going to be a bit average. And I have a sixth sense that some of these very funky little movies in Uncertain Regard are going to be fantastic, and I'm going to miss them. It's very annoying. But there it is. I'm not going to sit here and whinge, because I like being able to write quickly, and I've always written very quickly. I always like writing almost immediately on getting out of the film. I'm not one of these people who has to go in, think about it usually. No, I don't really. I mean, I've got used to, I kind of not sure that I like doing it, but I can certainly do it. I can write on my phone, which means I don't have to go back to my hotel room, which could be a 15-minute, 20-minute walk away in the burning sun.
Time is of the essence.
And time is of the essence. So I have really, I'm contributing more and more and more. But as I say, I don't mind doing it, and I kind of look back to my days at the Evening Standard, which was a really great educational experience in just writing quickly.
A vocational school for where we are
at. It is, yeah, kind of was.
Just a quick plug for a new Celebrating Cinema event series at Lab 111. Sign of the Times, run by our very own Hugo and media scholar Dan Hassler-Forrest. The premise is 21st century cinema and a live conversation. So anything from art house and pulp and the weird stuff that somehow became canon, and the films we're still fighting about. Screened with curated clips, an extended introduction, discussion afterwards, and of course, room for questions from you guys. Every month, Hugo and Dan pick a subject and record a Celebrating Cinema episode about it, and then continue the discussion live in the room with all of you after seeing the movie. First up, June 17th, the original The Fast and the Furious in a brand new 4K restoration. It's Dan's pick. Come and argue with us in person. Link for the tickets is in the show notes.
Well, to then jump into what, let's say, is of course, always, the meat on the bones of why we are here are the films themselves. I think we are both kind of covering a lot of the main competition. And I'm just very curious, we are now a couple of days away before the jury will hand out all of the awards, including the Golden Palm. And to predict all of these things is always very complicated. Much more interested am I in what would be a personal standout for you, one of the films that you saw and that you already hold very dearly to your heart.
Right. Well, in the competition, I would say, for me, there are some good movies in competition, some very good ones, and the two that I think are the best. One is Andrey Zvyagintsev Minotaur, his very interesting loose remake of Chabrol's Unfaithful Woman, with a twist of a few other interesting things, which I thought was a very brilliant commentary on what I take to be the state of play in Russia, life during wartime in Russia, the state of the Russian soul and the Russian mind.
Может, вечером сходим куда-нибудь?
Сегодня?
Например?
С чего вдруг?
Ну, просто побудем вместе. Наших давай позовем.
It's funny, in Russia, you tend to talk that way. You don't tend to speak about, or I don't tend to speak about the Spanish soul or the Norwegian soul.
It's only the Russians.
Or even the British. It seems to be the Russians. And you, for some reason, you want to think, yes, it's the Russian soul. And Zvyagintsev is brilliant at conveying that in the most amazing way. And it's a very watchable and very gripping film. It's one of the few films I can imagine sitting down to watch again because it has this sort of gripping kind of noir thriller aspect to it, which I thought was amazing.
Well, how about we just start with that film and unpack it a bit more. For me, this is also one of the standouts of the festival, and I was very pleased to see that you gave it a glowing 5-star review in The Guardian. Especially, you could say, because Andrey Zvyagintsev, as one of the most preeminent contemporary directors from Russia, who is often been equated with Andrei Tarkovsky and seen as only one of the few heirs of, let's say, the peak Soviet tradition of grand cinema. It was not a given that he would return so spectacularly to the Croisette or the world of cinema to begin with, especially given the fact that a couple of years ago during the COVID times, he was first and foremost, of course, in exile after fleeing Russia as being one of the greatest critic casters in the world of cinema of the Russian regime and its aggression in Ukraine. However, he also almost passed away from a heinous case of COVID during the pandemic years. And yet, in exile, shooting the film in Latvia, he returned with a film that is one of the rare Russian films that actually tries to portray what was happening shortly after February 2022 from the ground itself, like in the inner mechanisms, like you said, of the Russian soul. I think there was a great danger, or let's say a kind of like suspicion that because of these conditions and also his exilement, the film would revert to a more overt sentimentalism that has not been present in previous work. Yet it is a, I would say, starkly classic Zvyagintsev picture. Can you unpack a bit more what are, like, let's say, why it fits so perfectly in such, let's say, a limited but vast oeuvre that he has produced before?
Well, in a way, it's his least opaque film in that it delivers you exactly what's going on, and the moments in when you realize, oh boy, I know what's going on now, I get it. They happen quite quickly. The moment when Gleb, the mini oligarch, tells his assistant, we need to hire 14 truck drivers. And his assistant says, what do you mean 14 trucks? We don't have 14 trucks. And he says, never mind.
Just hire them.
Just hire these guys.
Pay
They've got
them
to
double.
be young. Yeah, pay them to offer them double, whatever it is, and make sure they're young. Maybe military training. That would be good too. Knowing, of course, full well that they're going to be called up for military service before he has to pay them a damn thing.
Yes.
So that really hit me because it's like Gogol's Dead Souls. He becomes like a sort of landowner with serfs. He has serfs. He has a number of souls on his estate, and he can dispose of 14 of them in the manner of the Greek myth, sacrificing 14 people to the Minotaur.
Which is
So
also
this is-
in the film itself, or in Russia right now, a prerequisite for this business owner, the protagonist of the film, is to decide shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine which staffers are essential and should be kept at home, and which ones are disposable and can be sent as cannon fodder to the front.
There's total cannon fodder, and it's something so brutal and so cynical that this decision is being stitched up by these sort of chieftain cabal of business owners peremptorily called together by the mayor, who has a photograph of Vladimir in long shot. That's the only shot of Vladimir is in long shot, briefly. There's quite a lot of Zeds on cars and tanks, but one of Vladimir. And it is overwhelmingly cynical and horrible that that's what's happening, that these 14 guys, and when you realize what's happening, I almost don't want to talk about the spoilers, but when you realize what's happening, these 14 guys are called to the office, and he has to go through the motions of telling them what the job is. It's like, unwatchably horrible.
It's like uninspired HR speech,
he does
knowing
this,
full well what will be their fate.
Right? Why they've been called in. It's nothing to do with what the truck is going to be like, what the tech specifications of the truck are. So there's that amazing thing that he does of it baffles the audience for a second, and then it dawns on you what's happening, and then again, I've got to be careful about spoilers. A secondary aspect to this, that he realizes there's another way in which he can put this new thing to use. And I'm not going to talk about it, but it's even worse than that. It's even more bad faith, even more cynicism.
Cynical opportunism.
Yeah.
I would say, without also veering into spoiler territory, is that it felt like a very bleak, sardonic, slow take on a Coen Brothers film at times, where a crime gets muffled away and kind of like stitched up in the framework of a much greater mechanism against the backdrop of all of these insane, heinous things that are, of course, happening in 2022.
Yes.
And it kind of raises a question before we jump to a next film, which is that nowadays, also after the, let's say, catastrophic rhetorical failure of the Berlinale Film Festival to properly address how art should speak about the political reality that we live in. This is one of those rare films in which the two of them, the personal, the political, but also the artistic, seems to kind of like sit next to each other and complement each other seamlessly. And I'm wondering what you made of, also, speaking of the timelessness, how this film screams its urgency without overselling itself.
It is very urgent. It doesn't need to scream. There is a kind of silent scream at the center of the movie. I thought this during Berlinale, for what this is worth, is that the political engagement of movies, and of course politics is embedded in the movies. And I think Wim Wenders was maybe, he spoke off the cuff and he got it wrong. And maybe if he had a time to think about it, because I think there's a kind of gotcha aspect of film festival conferences. There's a kind of gotcha being played. It's about the movies themselves.
Yes.
It's not about doing a speech or some sort of statement, because you can always be accused of having missed somebody else out. And there's a real danger. If you made a statement about Gaza, somebody say, well, you haven't made a statement about Sudan. What an insult. What an outrage. You have erased the experience of the people of Sudan, whatever like that. I think it's about the movies. And I think film festival directors, it tends to only to be Berlinale, and it tends only to be the very hapless and cack-handed ministers that the German federal government seems to attract. They get themselves into a real state, and Cannes is a bit more adroit and doesn't get itself into a state. But for my money, it's about the movies. It has to be about the movies. It can't be about making kind of statements, really, because otherwise you'll get yourself into a statement. What people talk about is erasure and silences. And of course, you can't say everything about everything, so you'll get it.
And this is why I appreciate Zvyagintsev film so much, is that I think he is so confident and assured that the movie will speak for itself, and then he constructed it so finely, so minutiously, but also so grandly. It's a grand film. That it will do the work for you.
Just on a little sidebar, what the director told me is that he and Vladimir weren't always enemies. On the contrary, 20 years ago they had kind of a bromance.
Really?
Yeah, it was just after his movie The Return of Возвращение got the Venice Golden Lion, is that he was summoned to the Kremlin. By Vladimir. and he was given to understand that he hasn't got any choice. This isn't a kind of just bland education. Vladimir wishes to see you over tea.
Yeah, if you're invited, you have to show up.
You're not saying, "Oh, I can't make it." Then do you think he sort of marched in?
Can we do a rain check?
Yeah, a rain check. And Vladimir was just sitting there, and he sat down opposite Vladimir, and Putin was absolutely thrilled with the return. He'd watched it over and over again. He loved it.
Really now?
He was
Wow.
very overexcited about this as a great Russian work of art. And this was still when he was sort of a kind of approachable, kind of modern European leader, and not necessarily a mad dictator, but also a little bit of a mad dictator.
A bit
but
despotic.
Certainly somebody who thought of himself as the guardian of the Russian soul.
Exactly.
To return to that subject.
Yes.
And he went, "Oh, I love it so much." And I've watched it so much, and he produced a pirated copy of The Return. He should have showed Andrey, "Look, I've watched it so often." And Zvyagintsev told me that he couldn't stop himself. He went, "But Mr. President, that's a pirated copy." And there was a terrible silence. Everybody went silent, and he went, "Oh my God, did I just criticize Mr. Putin?" And Vladimir made a big deal of going, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and he threw away the copy as if to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry.
What a remarkable
I'm sorry,
story.
Maestro. I didn't mean to offend you." He said he'd never been so scared. He said something very wrong, and it just coming quite close to really committing a bit of a faux pas in front of the great man. But it was fine. He walked out and it was all right. But it was a strange moment of cultural and political awareness which never came back. I mean, he continued, of course, to make important
Great films.
and critical films,
Yes.
like Leviathan in
Loveless.
Russia. Exactly, with the support of the Russian state.
But
there
both
was
of them still banned from screening,
But yes.
nonetheless.
And then, well, the bromance or whatever it was certainly was off. It was very off.
It's a bit more frosty nowadays.
Yeah, it was a very, very frosty. Yeah.
Well, that's an insane anecdote. And before I let you go, because we're all, of course, here still on the beat, I'm very curious if there is a surprise or a film that really unexpectedly took hold of you in the midst of the chaos, the frenzy of cinema that we're engaging with.
I don't want to talk about the surprises which are kind of bad surprises. Where
Let's stay favorable.
I've seen some surprisingly mediocre films from big names.
I think that's also, to be honest, to briefly touch upon that, as somewhat of a red thread throughout the festival for many of the attending critics especially, that we have to kind of swallow or parse through a lot of relative disappointments of household names that we hold in great esteem.
I mean, some of these movies I've actually kind of liked in a way. I didn't dislike them. Some of them I have disliked though, and I thought, this is a huge name and they're doing something which I think is kind of bafflingly moderate, mediocre some of the time. The other great thing, which is, again, not a surprise because it's a director I love, is Paweł Pawlikowski's Fatherland, about Thomas Mann and Erika Mann, his daughter, played by Hans Sichler, who's a fascinating German actor. Also, the author of a fascinating book about Franz Kafka, incidentally.
Yes,
he wrote
true.
Franz Kafka Goes to the Movies, about Kafka's interest in cinema. It was a fantastic book which set itself the task of resurrecting the movies that Kafka went to see and talked about in his diaries. It's a terrific book. Of course, Sandra Hüller, wonderful actress, playing Mann's daughter.
Likewise, a film of a preeminent Eastern European director who hasn't been on the film festival circuit for too long, as Cold War, his previous film, was already quite a while ago. And yet this film, again, also sits perfectly within Pawlikowski's also quite, let's say, moderately sized yet grand oeuvre. I personally thought this was one of his greatest films because there was also a kind of sardonic irony in the film that I appreciated very much. I think it's a sign of great intellect when you can deploy irony and humor as a very pointed weapon almost to the narrative of the film. How do you kind of see this film in relation to these other celebrated modern classics of Pawlikowski?
Well, in a way it's his most literate film. It's about the real world. It's not a made-up story. It's sort of about the real world. It's made with terrific concision and it's sort of compressed into this little nugget of poignancy and pain, which I thought worked terrifically well. It's terrifically theatricalized in a good way, I think. It's all about the speeches. So many of the events in it are taking place in public in a way. They're taking place at parties or on stage and so on and so forth. And I loved the kind of reflecting on the nature of the German soul, if we're allowed to give that a kind of Russian status.
But then a bit more, let's say, a bit more schizophrenic, binary.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I loved what Pawlikowski usually goes in for something much more gloomy and, in a way, less about the dialogue, in a way, more about the visuals, something about the drifting moodscape of a movie. This was, in a way, more old-fashioned. It was more about the speeches and the speechifying, the speech and drama. And I'm old-fashioned enough to kind of like that.
I loved it as well.
I kind of loved it. Not everybody loves it as much as me, but I adored it.
I mean, we have the rule of third. Is there also another one that for our listeners, because surely most of these competition films will find their way to international and also Dutch distribution, would there be another one that you would like to single out as a film to look out for in the coming year?
Sure. I mean, in competition, I would say The Beloved by Rodrigo Sorogoyen. I very much liked it. And I think because it's Javier Bardem, I think it's got a very good chance of into cinemas all over Europe, all over the world.
We have Dutch distributor for it already, yes.
How is she working out for you? I think there's something missing.
No, I don't think there's nothing missing. I think she's fine. And she's doing things that are not easy to do.
I said it's his scariest film since No Country for Old Men.
Yes,
in that he is,
easily.
It's about emotional abuse, it's about coercive control, and it's more disturbing because he begins the movie as this rather charming lion of the cinema. He's supposed to be this great director who's won the Cannes Palme d'Or and won Oscars and all the rest of it. And for complicated reasons that he himself doesn't fully understand, he wants to hire his long-estranged, grown-up daughter from a previous relationship and put her in his film.
Somewhat strangely echoing sentimental value, and yet the film is unlike this film completely.
Totally,
it's like only on a let's say abstract story level they seem to resemble each other, but otherwise it's a completely different picture.
Completely different, and sentimental value was what it said on the title. It was
sentimental. Yes.
There is unsentimental value in this movie because, frankly, it is more. Films about movies being made so often become woozy, rapturous celebrations of cinema itself, but this
and
one
also
isn't.
way too navel gazing.
Yeah, a lot of navel gazing. Whereas this one virtually says that cinema and filmmaking is a massive, elaborate setup which facilitates abuse, facilitates power, facilitates oppressive and cruel behavior. It's very, very pessimistic about cinema, actually. But I thought it was very powerful and fascinating, and I was kind of gripped by it like a thriller. I was absolutely gripped by it, especially the scenes where he gets more and more angry.
My God, these are incredibly
terrible
tense
scenes. And I thought, oh my God, I can imagine being one of the actors in that scene with not much to do, but nothing to do, but just sort of, please.
to eat a mackerel soup.
Yeah. And just please let this be over this ordeal. Please let it be over. I thought it was great, and there's a couple of other movies I like very much. My other main picks are outside the main competition. I would say Clio Barnard's Icy Buildings Fall Like Lightning. That's a very British film. It's a very
also
British...
has Dutch distributing.
Oh, okay,
by the way.
great.
Yeah.
It's a very British social realist movie. It's not to everybody's taste, I think, but I loved it because it was all about the 5 big performances, selling it to you very hard with people in quite extreme close-up for so much of the time. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. There's a French film in Critics Week which I'm selling. I'm trying to get the distributors that I know.
Pay attention, people listening now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love Marine Atlan's La Gradiva in Critics Week, a beautiful little film which I think has been picked up for the UK, but I'd love it to do well because I thought that's a lovely little movie.
This one then I have to seek out. Well, then maybe Peter, as a final question, we are now at the 28th year of your film critic adventure here in Cannes. I'm just very interested in how do you sustain, let's say, a sense of curiosity, maybe also a sense of wonder when, like you said, the environment that we find ourselves here in doesn't change itself that much. How do you basically remain as open and vibrant and curious as possible to also see these films at face value and find a level of excitement that you maybe felt at the beginning of your film critical career?
You have to cultivate a mental habit of openness, a mental habit of receptivity. I think it's easier at Cannes. I should just say that the thing about Cannes that nobody talks about enough is that it is, I think, uniquely pro-critic. It's very pro-critic and pro-press. How many other festivals have a screening theatre named after a critic, named after Andrey. London Film Festival hasn't named anything after a critic. Nobody else has.
Or to have this gorgeous terrace where we're sitting now right now, so we can have this conversation.
And they have something called the Dîner de la Presse, a dinner specifically for members of the press. I mean, you'd wait a million years for that to happen in London or in Berlin or in Venice. Nobody does that there. But there is still a sense of criticism as being important in Cannes. There really is. And of talking about cinema. I've had conversations about cinema that I somehow don't have anywhere else in the world. I don't have them in Berlin. Although there are plenty of smart people in Berlin who are wonderful. I love Trisha Tuttle, who's in charge of Berlin. But it's not quite the same ecosystem as there is in Cannes. Everybody talks about how, you know, there's a sort of cynicism and it's all about the parties, it's all about brand sponsorship from luxury accessories and all the rest of it. But even so, even alongside that, there is still a strong tradition of caring about cinephilia and about cinema, which I think is great.
And then that's something that you nurture and sustain for yourself as well.
Yeah,
for
I think so.
a couple of years to go until we can celebrate your 30th anniversary.
Oh my
here
goodness,
at the
please
Beat.
don't talk about it. Oh my God, that would be a horrible moment because the people don't think, okay, it's time to get rid of this guy. And so I'm not really keen to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm sort of scared by it. It's like a kind of vertigo. I think it can't really be that long. I feel like I've only been coming here for a few years. I really do. It's like you have the Cannes hallucination, which a lot of old timers like me have, is you walk around and you think, what year is it? I think if you said to me, is it 2004 or is it 2019 or is it 2009? I don't know. It could be the same because you walk up and down the Croisette and everything looks sort of the same, and time kind of slows down to a stop. Especially if you come here and go do the whole thing. And I'm very keen that people should do that.
Yes, agreed.
Not many people do it. The mark of a real critic is somebody who attends every single screening day of the Cannes Film Festival, however brutal it is. And it can be if you set yourself too much to do. Because I you know, people say, oh, I always burst into tears once in Cannes. I mean, I don't, but I know what you mean. I know how you feel. Because you can set yourself just a little bit too much to do, and sometimes running up and down the Croisette because you're late for something. I mean, I've done it myself. You're late for a screening. So
and you want to violently push everybody aside.
That's it. Everybody starts, especially in the second week, people start pushing and shoving a little bit because they get, they think that they're used to it now, and they think this is my home. I'm allowed to push you out of the way because I'm used to all this. And so you run up the Croisette in the burning sun with your lungs bursting with pain and the sweat running into your eyes, desperate to get into the screen. That is not good. That is not good. And you have to, I mean, when people ask me, what do you do, people who are new to it, I say, well, look, you know what? Walk the route. Spend a little time, walk the routes between the venues. See how long it takes to get yourself there. Allow yourself a little bit longer. Over breakfast, figure out what it is you're doing for the day. Don't give yourself too much to do.
This is some quintessential life advice from, I would say, one of the greatest cinema troopers, as they say, still on the beat. Yeah. Peter, thank you so much for this message in a bottle from out of place and out of time Cannes. Could be 2026, could be 2004, as you said.
2046.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's such a pleasure to speak with you and to taste a bit of that enthusiasm for film you've cultivated for so long.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm very, very pleased you asked me here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for this year's Cannes special. Thank you so much for listening. Do let us know which films from this year's selection you can't wait to see. Join us next week when Elliot and I will dive into the back rooms. Because the YouTube spooky series of short films was turned into a feature for A24 by 20-year-old director Kane Parsons. Also, keep sending us your film hot takes and confessions on Instagram in a voice note, or send your voice note to celebratingcinema@lab111.nl. Stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following @lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Do you love what we do? Support us by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us climb the ranks of the podcast charts. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, and co-produced by myself, Laura Gomans. Music comes from Hugo Emmerzael, and the artwork is by Studio FFF.